On this Thursday night, the U.S. has maxed out on its debt. The possible repercussions for America and the world.
The debt limit poses significant risks.
Plus, recession projections in Canada, how long it might last, and its severity. Actor Alec Baldwin will be charged in that fatal shooting on a film set, his potential prison sentence. Calling it quits.
For me, it's time.
Why one of the world's few female leaders is leaving. Her legacy of leadership. And of course, Plowy McPlowface made the grade. So did
Control-Alt-Delete, Darth Blader.
The punny names Edmonton dug up for its snowplows.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin tonight with an eye on the economy, both here in Canada and in the U.S. The American government, which has an astonishing amount of debt, has hit the limit of what it can borrow. It is quite the milestone. The U.S. owes a record $31.4 trillion. That's the so-called debt ceiling. To continue paying the country's bills, lawmakers must raise that ceiling even higher so the U.S. government can borrow more money and avoid a default. And because the U.S. is the world's largest economy, defaulting would destabilize not just the U.S., but the entire global economy, including Canada. Avoiding that is going to involve an intense political fight. Our coverage tonight begins with Jackson Proskow in Washington.
As the global economy teeters on the brink of recession, American lawmakers may push it over the edge by failing to raise the limit on how much money the U.S. government can borrow, what's known as the debt ceiling.
If it actually isn't raised, that's extremely concerning. That would mean that the U.S. government cannot pay for all of the spending that Congress has required it to pay for.
The U.S. already faces a staggering $31 trillion debt, a figure that has risen under both Democrats and Republicans. The two parties usually agree to raise the borrowing limit. They've done it more than 90 times before. This time, Republicans refuse to cooperate. They're demanding deep spending cuts, while Democrats reject any concessions.
Find the compromise and find the common sense compromise that puts us back onto a balanced budget.
The clock is now ticking on this unprecedented debt default. If it happens, the U.S. government will be unable to pay for programs like Social Security and unable to pay salaries to millions of federal workers. The risks could spread worldwide because the U.S. will also be unable to make payments on the trillions of dollars in debt that are held by foreign nations. That would deliver a serious blow to the U.S. credit rating. It could drive soaring interest rates even higher. A deep recession would all but certainly follow.
That's going to have notable economic effects. Put that alongside what I think would be a significant stock market correction.
The last time the U.S. came close to default was in 2011, when fear alone was enough to drive down the U.S. credit rating and the markets before a deal was reached. The lessons from that near miss may be the best hope for ending this new round of political brinksmanship by convincing lawmakers that the cost of not borrowing more is simply too high. Jackson Proskow, Global News, Washington.
That uncertainty in the U.S. is just one factor putting pressure on Canada's economy. A recent Bank of Canada survey found 2/3 of businesses and 70% of consumers think a recession is likely in the next 12 months. That doesn't mean it will happen, of course, and there are bright spots such as low unemployment. And Gaviola has a reality check on recession fears in Canada.
Polls show most Canadians think we're either already in a recession or that there's one right around the corner.
The next couple of years are going to be pretty rough for the economy.
But are we all clear on what exactly that means? Recessions are a significant, widespread, and prolonged downturn in economic activity, typically defined as at least 2 consecutive quarters of negative economic growth. Most economists see a recession in the cards this year, but they have different ideas about when it will start and how long it will last.
Our research is showing a 75% chance of recession in the next 12 months.
We will be in a recession starting in the first half of 2023.
High inflation, rising interest rates, and household debt levels many call concerning are all factors. So are things happening beyond our borders. The war in Ukraine, Europe's energy crisis, and the slowing of major economies, including the U.S. But most experts see a recession coming that, as recessions go, won't be the worst.
It's going to be relatively mild compared to historical standards.
There's also a psychological aspect because recessions can be self-fulfilling prophecies. If enough people worry about a recession, that pullback in spending and activity can push economic growth into the red.
It affects people's behavior in terms of their spending patterns, investment patterns, say when it comes to buying a new home.
There are some bright spots. The torrid pace of inflation has cooled, and our labor market is strong, with unemployment near record lows.
There's enough job vacancies in the economy that the pain of a recession, or a typical recession, really not be felt this time around.
Recession don't have to be scary. Recession don't have to be like the one that we experienced in the financial crisis in 2008 or the COVID pandemic in 2020.
Canadians can keep this in mind as they brace for yet another recession. Anne Gaviola, Global News, Toronto.
Some big news in Hollywood. Actor Alec Baldwin could face 18 months in jail. He and a weapons specialist from a movie set will be charged with involuntary manslaughter in the death of a cinematographer. Halyna Hutchins was shot with a live round from a prop gun in 2021 on the set of the movie Rust, while Baldwin was rehearsing a scene. The district attorney says while there was no intention to cause death, there was a lack of safety on the set, and actors shouldn't get a free pass. Heather Yourex-West reports.
The fact that Alec Baldwin was holding the gun that ultimately killed cinematographer Halyna Hutchins has never been in question. The 2021 shooting death that took place on set during rehearsal for the movie Rust was accidental, involving a prop gun. But more than a year later, investigators have determined the 42-year-old's death was also criminal, and 3 people, including the actor, have been charged. News of the charges was posted on the New Mexico District Attorney's Office Facebook page. After a thorough review of the evidence and the laws of the state of New Mexico, I have determined that there is sufficient evidence to file criminal charges, Mary Carmack-Altweiss said.
The charges all relate to negligence, nothing intentional. They are not trying to show that any part of this wasn't accidental. They were just trying to show that they were not exercising caution and care in how they handled the gun.
Alec Baldwin and Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, the armorer on set, have each been charged with 2 counts of involuntary manslaughter, while Assistant Director David Halls pled guilty to a lesser charge of negligent use of a deadly weapon. If any one of these 3 people had done their job, said Special Prosecutor Andrea Reeb, Halyna Hutchins would be alive today. Hutchins' family welcomed the announcement, while Baldwin's attorney said the charges represent a terrible miscarriage of justice.
I was a bit surprised. I thought the armorer would be charged, but not Alec Baldwin himself, because according to reports, he was told that the gun was cold, meaning there were no live bullets in it.
Live ammunition is not allowed onto Canadian film sets, but serious and even fatal accidents happen every year. Hutchins' death has placed a spotlight on the dangers still present within the industry and the need for change. Heather Yourex-West, Global News.
And so today I'm announcing that I will not be seeking re-election.
She had to compose herself to get those words out. New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern surprised everyone yesterday with her news. But after almost 6 challenging years in office, she has said she's run out of steam.
I know what this job takes, and I know that I no longer have enough in the tank to do it justice. It's that simple.
Ardern was 37 when she became leader of New Zealand's Labour Party. She easily won 2 elections, but she says one of the lessons of leadership is knowing when to leave. Eric Sorensen reports on her reasons and the reaction.
And let's keep moving.
As leader of a small, faraway island nation, Jacinda Ardern's impact reached far beyond the Jacinda mania that swept New Zealand. Women on the world stage is not new, but women in positions of power are still in the minority. And Ardern brought a compassionate leadership that is rare, as when a gunman in New Zealand slaughtered Muslims during Friday prayers.
This is one of New Zealand's darkest days.
Ardern decried the white supremacy behind the attack, but it was her heartfelt sympathy for the Muslim community that stood out most.
They have chosen to make New Zealand their home, and it is their home. They are us.
Ardern's feelings were unguarded and genuine, and yet she was decisive in what should happen next.
I can tell you one thing right now. Our gun laws will change.
And they did, a nationwide ban on the most deadly guns. Ardern always seemed natural, whether meeting the public or responding to an earthquake the moment it happened.
Quite a decent shake here, but if you see things moving behind me.
And her reasons now for leaving seem just as natural and candid.
I am human. Politicians are human. We give all that we can for as long as we can, and then it's time.
Ardern was one of the first world leaders to give birth while in office. She's seen as a stalwart for progressive values and women's rights. Canada's Prime Minister among those who thanked her for her empathetic, compassionate leadership. Australia's Prime Minister, too, called her empathy and insight powerful leadership qualities.
That's really rare and really powerful, and something that people are craving, real authenticity, real vulnerability.
When New Zealand's COVID restrictions worked,
I did a little dance.
But like everywhere else, vaccines, lockdowns, and mask mandates became highly controversial. And as a woman, Ardern may have been a prime target for some. Threats against her requiring police response tripled in the last 3 years.
I think the cumulative challenges that we've faced as a team, and they have been extraordinary, has taken its toll.
Even that admission represents uncommon leadership qualities.
It's incredibly admirable that she speaks out about her emotional health and that she's not scared to come forward. By doing that, she smashes stigma for other people. They also feel comfortable in doing that.
Bit shocked, actually. Yeah, can't believe it.
New Zealanders are surprised Ardern is stepping back, but she's only 42, and many hope she will step forward again, somewhere on the world stage. Eric Sorensen, Global News.
Germany's chancellor says his country will only send battle tanks to Ukraine if the U.S. does the same. Speaking at the Davos summit, Olaf Scholz said Germany will continue to make decisions based on partnerships with other allies, but will not act alone. Ukraine says it needs hundreds of tanks to fend off Russia's invasion. Poland and Finland have German-made Leopard 2 tanks Ukraine wants, but Germany needs to give permission for their re-export. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has not ruled out sending tanks too if Germany approves the donation of military vehicles it sold to Canada. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is blunt. He says while the free world thinks, the terrorist state kills. Western defense ministers will meet on Friday to discuss future military commitments to Ukraine. Over 1 million protesters took to the streets in cities across France today. They're angry about the government's plans to raise the retirement age from 62 to 64 years to qualify for a full state pension. Police used tear gas to hold back massive crowds in Paris. Some protesters there throwing fireworks. Many held signs saying pensions and salaries need to rise, not the age of retirement. Emmanuel Macron's government says the reforms are necessary to keep the pension system running. The reforms have not yet been approved in Parliament, and unions say they will keep fighting. At least 3 more deaths have been attributed to political protests in Peru as thousands of demonstrators from rural areas descended on the nation's capital. Protesters flooded the streets of Lima to show support for ousted former President Pedro Castillo. He was arrested last month and is being investigated on charges of rebellion and conspiracy. Weeks of clashes between demonstrators and police have resulted in more than 40 deaths, according to Human Rights Watch. Demonstrators are calling for fresh elections and demanding Castillo be released from prison. The federal housing minister gets grilled. Coming up, the opposition's appetite for answers about why he hired a food marketing firm. There are more questions about the judgment of a federal cabinet minister. Last year, Housing and Diversity Minister Ahmed Husson faced controversy over a $133,000 grant to an organization whose senior consultant posted anti-Semitic comments on social media. Now the minister has spent $93,000 in constituency funds for public relations help from a communications firm that specializes in marketing food. Mackenzie Gray is following this from Ottawa. Mackenzie?
Well, Donna, Ahmed Husson is under fire yet again for contracts he's handed out, this time paying for communications help from a firm that specializes in the food industry. It's usually chefs and foodie bloggers that Toronto-based Much More Media work with, but Ahmed Husson didn't take the cookie-cutter approach when he hired the company to work in his constituency. According to public documents, the minister's Toronto office gave 14 different contracts between January 2021 and September 2022 to have Much More Media do PR work. The bill, over $93,000, which represents 14% of Husson's entire constituency office budget for that period. So who is Much More Media? Hiba Tarek is listed as the company's only director and works out of this condo in Pickering. She told Global News her work for Husson included planning and drafting flyers that are mailed to constituents, as well as videos and content creation strategies. As for the marketing agency's own content creation, it's limited. Their last Instagram post is from 2018, and they only had one follower on Twitter. That's until they deleted their account earlier this afternoon. Prior to getting the 14 contracts, Tarek said she had no personal connection with Husson, but she does have ties to one of Husson's former senior staffers. Abdikir Ahmed worked as Husson's former director of policy in 2020 and is listed alongside Tarek as a co-director of a corporation called Empire of Goodness. Ahmed describes it as a non-profit organization where he serves as a volunteer director. Tarek didn't disclose her relationship with Ahmed until we questioned her about it, but she says it's independent of her work with Husson. The opposition believes the minister shouldn't have given the contracts out.
Obviously, doesn't pass the smell test, is something that's problematic, should not be happening.
They always seem to find a way to give these contracts to people they're friends with or people who their friends are friends with.
Husson declined an interview request, but a spokesperson for the minister defended the contracts, saying members of parliament are permitted to expense a communications firm to carry out ways of communicating information to their constituents. And Husson's office is correct. There are no rules saying the Minister of Housing can't hire a communications firm to work for him, even if that company's big promise, Donna, is to make clients a pioneer in the culinary scene.
All right, Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa, thank you. Honoring hockey history ahead, one of the sport's living legends receives a hometown tribute. British tennis great Andy Murray pulled off one of the most incredible comebacks in recent history at the Australian Open while playing under grueling conditions. At one point, Murray was down 2 sets to his Australian opponent, but fought back to victory in a 5-set thriller. And what makes part of Murray's resurgence so amazing are the injuries he's overcome. The 3-time Grand Slam champion underwent surgery to replace part of his hip with a metal cap in 2019. This match was the longest of his career, lasting 5 hours and 45 minutes. A living legend in the hockey world is being honored with a life-size portrait in his New Brunswick hometown.
2, 3.
Willie Orie is the first black hockey player to be drafted into the NHL. His portrait is now part of the permanent collection at Fredericton's Beaverbrook Art Gallery. Orie lives in California now. He couldn't be at the unveiling. The portrait marks the 65th anniversary of his NHL debut with the Boston Bruins in 1958. What's so punny? Next, the clever snowplow names to keep an eye out for in Edmonton. They play a critical role in cities every winter and never really get the recognition they deserve. Well, that has all changed for Edmonton's snowplows. The city asked the public to suggest names for 15 of its snow clearing machines, and boy, did they slide into action. It's happening in other cities too. From Darth Blader to Buzz Ice Clear, snowplows are getting new identities, and as Sarah Ryan reports, adding some joy to the long winter.
Edmontonians got slick with naming our city's snowplows this winter.
Originally, we were going to name 5 plows, but based on the overwhelming response to this with over 2,100 entries, we expanded to the top 15.
Winning names include Blizzard of Oz, Buzz Ice Clear, Control Salt Delete, Darth Blader, and the Big Leplowski. Some local celebs skidded in too, Amersleet Snowhy and Connor McBladett.
That's Edmonton, you know. They're hockey crazy, and that's why it's fun to play here.
These contests have been taking the country by storm from St. John, New Brunswick to Mission, BC. Pretty soon, every municipality might have a Plowy McPlowface. But Hamilton gets points for creativity. Its top spot went to Max Kerminator, named for Max Kerman, the proud Hamiltonian from Arkells. Here in Edmonton, residents hope the new snow patrol will start its tour of duty soon in a neighborhood near them.
It is like getting over a tiny mountain in and out of parking stalls. I definitely have learned to counter drift on these side roads lately and have witnessed like a few cars slide into one another, so it's obviously not great.
The snow drifts on the road are like higher than my tires, so you've got to be in the right rut.
It's a mess. They need to get out and do that final plowing.
The city of Edmonton says with unseasonably warm January weather, it's been receiving a number of phone calls and emails from frustrated drivers complaining about streets like these in front of their homes.
This is definitely an area we're hearing a lot about, and we hear you. We know the residential areas are sloppy.
The city continues to say it's too warm and they're worried about making bigger ruts and large windrows.
That was something that we experienced last year with a lot of negative feedback about people losing their parking.
But they say Mr. Plow and all his friends will be coming to the rescue soon.
Next week, once the temperatures drop, we'll be grooming residential neighborhoods.
Our driveway snowed in.
And if Mother Nature doesn't cooperate, you know who to call.
Hello, I'm Mr. Plow.
Sarah Ryan, Global News, Edmonton.
And that is Global National for this Thursday. I'm Donna Friesen, born with a winter name. Tonight's Your Canada is Peterborough, Ontario. Thanks for watching. I'll see you Saturday for the new reality. Bye-bye.